In the golden light of an early autumn morning, Bayside Preparatory Academy's marble-clad entrance and manicured lawns shimmered with an air of timeless prestige. Nestled in the affluent suburb of Seabrook, the school stood as a monument to tradition and privilege. Yet beneath its immaculate exterior lurked assumptions that could shatter lives without warning. On this Parents' Day, the hallowed halls of Bayside would soon bear witness to a truth that defied those very assumptions. Xavier Pierce, a thoughtful and determined 10-year-old with deep brown eyes and an unruly mop of hair, awoke with an uneasy mix of excitement and dread. Every morning, he dressed in his pristine academy uniform, a symbol of the school's elite heritage, but today, that uniform felt like a costume masking his true self. Xavier's heart pounded as he fastened the tight navy tie, a physical reminder of the double life he led, a quiet boy at home and a wary observer in the corridors of Bayside. Downstairs, his father, Nathaniel Pierce, sat at the kitchen table with an unreadable expression as he skimmed through confidential documents on his sleek tablet. Nathaniel, a high-ranking security strategist working for a top-secret national defense organization, carried himself with a measured reserve that belied the storm of secrets and danger that swirled around him. To Xavier, his father was a figure both enigmatic and heroic, though he rarely spoke of his work. This morning, however, was different. Today was the day when Xavier was to share something very personal with his classmates, a truth about his father's true profession. As the family piled into their modest sedan, Xavier pressed his face against the window. His eyes flicked between the familiar streets of Seabrook and the looming silhouette of the Academy building, its high iron gates guarding mysteries and buried history. Xavier's unease grew as he recalled the whispers that had been circulating among his peers, snide remarks about his family's background, assumptions fueled by envy and ignorance. The memory of last year's Parents' Day lingered painfully in his mind, a day when his brave attempt to speak the truth had been met with sneers and stifled laughter. At the school's driveway, the air was thick with anticipation as luxury cars rolled in, their sleek lines and polished chrome contrasting sharply with the modest Pierce sedan. In the midst of proud parents and excited chatter, Xavier's presence seemed both out of place and dangerously conspicuous. He clutched his backpack tight as if it were a lifeline, stepping onto the freshly paved path with a quiet resolve. Inside the grand foyer of Bayside, the atmosphere was charged with ceremony. Elegant banners celebrating excellence hung alongside portraits of illustrious alumni, and the hum of polite conversation filled the air. Yet, for Xavier, every smile and nod concealed judgments based on social class and cultural misconceptions. Amid the crowd, a particular figure caught his attention, a teacher with a crisp designer suit and an aloof countenance. Miss Collins, known for her impeccable poise and subtle condescension, seemed to dominate the room with an air of superiority. Her approving glances for some students were matched by a dismissive tilt of her head when directed at others. Class was about to begin in a bright, airy lecture hall adorned with polished oak panels and state-of-the-art technology. Xavier's heart sank as he recalled that his class would be discussing our parents' professions. For many, this was a proud moment to boast about influential careers and lavish lifestyles. But for Xavier, it was a double-edged sword, a chance to share the truth about his father's work, yet a battle against the preconceived notions that already marred his reputation. The room buzzed with excitement and self-importance as students took their seats, some chattering about the latest business deals their parents were involved in, others casually mentioning their latest diplomatic assignments. Xavier found a seat near the back of the room, accompanied by his best friend, Leo Bennett, a lively, red-haired boy whose easy smile and boundless energy often balanced Xavier's quiet apprehension. Leo's warm presence had always made Xavier feel less isolated, even if the world outside the classroom still seemed cold and judgmental. As the bell rang to commence the session, Miss Collins entered with a commanding stride. She greeted the class with an artificial brightness that did little to hide the sharp edge beneath. "Good morning, everyone," she said in a tone that was both inviting and intimidating. "Today, we'll be sharing what our parents do, an opportunity for you all to learn from the real world." Her eyes swept over the room, lingering briefly on Xavier with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Xavier's throat tightened as his name was called first in alphabetical order. With shaking legs and a heart full of quiet defiance, he stepped to the front of the room. The eyes of 24 classmates bore down on him, some curious, others already smirking in anticipation of his supposed exaggerations. He took a slow, measured breath, feeling the weight of their expectations settle on his slender shoulders. "My name is Xavier Pierce," he began, his voice trembling but determined to sound stronger than he felt. "Today, I'd like to talk about my father's job." He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat, and continued. "My father, Nathaniel Pierce, works at the National Strategic Security Center." For an instant, the room plunged into silence, a heavy pause that weighed more than any lecture could. Then, the smirks began, fast and relentless, the sound of derision that rippled through the classroom like a harsh wind. Ms. Collins' lips curled into a patronizing smile. "Oh, really?" she said, her tone laced with disbelief. "And what exactly does he do there? Is he the head honcho of some secret spy agency?" Her words, meant to tease, stung like icy needles. The laughter that followed was not the benign laughter of mischief, it was the biting mockery of those who had already made up their minds about him, based solely on his background and appearance. Xavier's face flushed an angry shade of crimson as he tried in vain to steady his voice. "I'm telling the truth," he insisted, his eyes pleading for understanding amidst a sea of derision. But his protest fell on deaf ears. The room, filled with biting comments and whispered insults, seemed to shrink around him, the walls closing in with every passing second. He retreated to his seat, his spirit battered by the cruelty of assumptions that cast him as an impostor. The rest of the day merged into a dismal blur. Every step he took through the polished corridors of Bayside was haunted by the echo of laughter and the lingering disdain of his peers and even some of his teachers. The prestigious institution, meant to inspire and elevate, had become a crucible where unchallenged prejudices smoldered dangerously. At lunchtime, Xavier found refuge on a quiet bench in the school's secluded courtyard, his thoughts a tumult of emotions, humiliation, anger, and the heavy sting of injustice. Leo joined him, his usual exuberance replaced by a solemn expression. "Xavier," Leo began softly, "I know it must hurt to be dismissed like that, but you know who you really are. You're one of the bravest people I know." For a moment, the kindness in Leo's words offered a small shelter against the storm of ridicule, yet it also underscored the unfairness of a world so quick to judge a child for speaking the truth. As the school day trudged on, Xavier's mind replayed that agonizing morning again and again. Every stifled laugh, every whispered "spy" that followed him was a reminder that, in the eyes of many, his father's work was too extraordinary to be believable, a truth too steeped in the realm of fantasy for a child from an ordinary family. And yet, deep within him, a spark of determination glowed. He resolved that one day, he would reclaim his story and show the world that his father's work was not only real but vital, a mission that demanded respect and understanding. After school, as the last rays of the sun bathed the city in a warm, forgiving light, Xavier's thoughts shifted to the looming Parents' Day event scheduled for later that week. He remembered the sharp dismissals and arrogant challenges thrown his way this morning, and in a moment of quiet resolve, he made a silent promise to himself. He would not let the cruelty of ignorance define him. Instead, he would harness his hurt, transforming it into a profound motivation, to not only reveal the truth about his father's work but to challenge the narrow perceptions that had wounded him so deeply. Back at home, the atmosphere was equally charged. Nathaniel Pierce, despite his stern and professional demeanor, could not hide a flicker of concern as he noted Xavier's subdued mood. The sacrifices he made to protect his family, keeping his work shrouded in secrecy, missing precious moments, enduring the burden of constant vigilance, seemed to weigh even more heavily on his soul today. Though he seldom spoke of the dangers lurking in the shadows of his occupation, he recognized that the cost of safeguarding national security often spilled over into the personal lives of those he loved. In the quiet aftermath of the day's events, as Xavier lay in bed with thoughts swirling like restless shadows, a question lingered in his young mind: how could his truth be so disdained, and why did the powerful assume that someone like him could not be part of such an important world? In that vulnerable, sleepless hour, the seeds of both despair and hope were sown. The bitter sting of prejudice mingled with a burning desire to prove that every truth, no matter how extraordinary, deserved to be heard and respected. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation between assumptions and reality, between the shadows of ignorance and the light of truth. Bayside Preparatory Academy, with all its splendid trappings, would soon be forced to reckon with the consequences of its shallow judgments, and Xavier's story was destined to reshape the narrative of power, prejudice, and pride. What do you think? Have you ever been misunderstood because of assumptions? Share your thoughts below. The dawn of Parents' Day arrived like the calm before a storm. The early morning mist clung to the manicured lawns of Bayside Preparatory Academy, softening the edges of the grand building's stone facade while a sense of anticipatory tension pulsed beneath the serene exterior. For Xavier Pierce, today was more than a school event, it was the moment when his truth would finally confront the cruelty of long-held prejudices. Xavier awoke with a mix of trepidation and steely determination. In the dim glow of his bedroom, the events of that fraught morning replayed vividly in his mind. The cold sting of laughter, the derisive sneers, and the barbed insinuations about his father's career were not just painful memories, they were fuel for a quiet resolve that had been building over time. As he dressed meticulously in his pristine academy uniform, each tie knot and button fastened with deliberate care, he vowed silently that he would no longer be defined by others' assumptions. In the kitchen, Nathaniel Pierce reviewed the final details of his day on his secure tablet. The tension that he usually concealed in calm professionalism now showed hints of concern. Despite years of balancing his dual worlds, one of covert national security and the other of tender fatherhood, Nathaniel could not ignore the growing storm outside the safe walls of his home. Every meeting, every classified briefing had prepared him for crises much larger than this day. Yet, it was precisely this challenge, a father's reputation and his child's dignity being tarnished by prejudice, that struck closest to his heart. By mid-morning, the halls of Bayside were abuzz with excitement. Parents in tailored suits and polished shoes mingled near the grand foyer. The air was filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the soft murmur of anticipation. But beneath the surface of scripted pleasantries, an undercurrent of tension simmered. Many parents, and even some faculty, had begun to sense that today was not just another ceremonial day, it was a reckoning with history, bias, and the unspoken truths that had plagued the academy for too long. Inside the bright and airy auditorium, rows of chairs were arranged for the presentations. Banners celebrated the academy's legacy of excellence, yet there was an irony too sharp to ignore now. Xavier's station at the front of the room was set up with modest dignity, a simple podium and a digital projector that promised to illuminate not just images, but truths. Nearby, Miss Collins took her place at the lectern, her expression a careful mask of professional composure. But as Xavier's eyes met hers, he detected a flicker of uncertainty, a momentary lapse that hinted at the internal conflict she was now forced to confront. The presentation began with the usual fanfare, parents extolling the virtues of their professions, boasting about business successes and charitable involvements. Yet as the program neared Xavier's turn, a palpable hush fell over the room. The murmurs subsided, and all eyes gradually turned toward him. In that silent moment, time seemed to stretch, every heartbeat echoing the courage it took to stand before an audience that had once scorned him. With a steadying breath, Xavier stepped up to the podium. His young face, illuminated by the soft glow of the projector, bore not the marks of childish apprehension but a resolve that belied his years. "Good morning," he began, his voice clear and unwavering. "My name is Xavier Pierce, and today I want to share something very personal about my family." His words, simple yet earnest, resonated in the hushed auditorium. He recounted, in his own measured tone, the complexities of growing up where truth and assumption collided. He spoke not just of his father's prestigious role at the National Strategic Security Center, a truth that many had once ridiculed, but also of the sacrifices and dangers that lay behind that title. With an honesty that challenged the veneer of elitism and prejudice, Xavier delved into the unseen world of covert operations, where every decision was weighed against the cost of safety and integrity. As Xavier spoke, the atmosphere shifted imperceptibly. The laughter and dismissive whispers that had marred his past now gave way to an attentive silence. Parents exchanged glances, some with expressions of dawning guilt, others with humble admiration. Even Ms. Collins' steely gaze softened into something unreadable, a mixture of regret and reluctant respect. Outside, Nathaniel watched from the entrance of the auditorium, his heart a tumult of pride and trepidation. He knew well the stakes of what was being unveiled today. In his world of hidden threats and classified operations, every word was a calculated risk, but this was different. This was a moment of vulnerability, of truth that demanded to be seen and heard. As he listened to Xavier's voice, steady and sincere, a surge of protective instinct and fierce pride welled up in him. Back at the podium, Xavier's presentation grew more impassioned. He recounted the countless times he had overheard baseless assumptions, the impact of those hurtful words on his self-worth, and the quiet resilience that had driven him to stand up and speak his truth. His narrative was interwoven with reflections on fairness, dignity, and the transformative power of understanding. Each sentence was a battle cry against a system that too often favored appearances over authenticity, where social standing and wealth dictated one's worth. A murmur of appreciation arose from the audience as Xavier referenced a line of thought that resonated deeply with many: assumptions are like shadows, they only exist because of the light we choose to ignore. His words struck a chord, prompting nods of agreement from those who had long harbored similar frustrations but never found the courage to voice them. The projector flickered to life behind him with images that were both symbolic and evocative, portraits of ordinary heroes in moments of quiet strength, images that spoke of hidden battles fought in silence. In that poignant sequence, the room seemed to transform. Every face in the audience, once marked by skepticism or detached indifference, now became a canvas of introspection. Parents, teachers, and students alike were compelled to reflect on their own judgments, questioning the biases that had clouded their perceptions. For many, this was the first time they truly saw beyond the surface, recognizing the depth and complexity of a child's truth. After the presentation concluded, a heavy silence filled the auditorium before a cascade of applause broke out. It was not the raucous clapping of shallow politeness but a measured, heartfelt ovation. Xavier's eyes glistened with tears, not of weakness, but of release, of finally having his truth acknowledged. In that moment, the gulf between him and those who had once ridiculed him began to narrow, replaced by a fragile bridge of understanding. Ms. Collins, standing at the lectern, felt the weight of her earlier condescension. The echoes of laughter she had once orchestrated now felt like a distant, painful memory. As she stepped forward to congratulate Xavier, her voice quavered with sincerity. "Xavier, that was truly brave," she said quietly, extending an olive branch that was as much an admission of past errors as it was a promise of change. Her apology, unadorned and sincere, rippled through the crowd, leaving many to wonder if the hardened walls of Bayside could finally begin to crumble. Meanwhile, whispers spread among the parents. Some approached Nathaniel with unspoken questions about the security work he did, a world that had been shrouded in mystery until now. While his professional obligations had always demanded discretion, he found himself compelled to share just enough to affirm that the sacrifices he made were real, and that the world he navigated was fraught with challenges that affected not only national safety but the very fabric of family life. The event continued with other presentations, but the atmosphere had irrevocably changed. What had begun as an opportunity for superficial bragging had evolved into a profound moment of collective introspection and acceptance. The truth that Xavier shared had illuminated a reality that many had long refused to see, a reality where courage, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of truth were values that transcended social status. In the final moments of the ceremony, as the audience slowly dispersed, quiet discussions broke out. Conversations turned to the nature of assumptions, the importance of listening, and the need to redefine what true prestige meant. The day's events had sown the seeds of a transformation that could ripple far beyond the ornate halls of Bayside Preparatory Academy. Walking out into the crisp autumn air, Xavier felt a quiet hope that perhaps this was the beginning of a shift, a step toward a community that valued truth over appearances and empathy over judgment. Nathaniel, standing beside him, shared a look of deep understanding with his son. The journey ahead was still uncertain, and challenges awaited them both, but for the first time, the weight of prejudice seemed a little lighter. "What did you take away from Xavier's courageous speech today?" share your thoughts. As the echoes of the auditorium's applause faded into the crisp autumn air, a quiet intensity began to stir behind the polished facade of Bayside Preparatory Academy. For Xavier Pierce, the triumph of his truth had given birth to both hope and lingering apprehension. In the hours following the Parents' Day ceremony, whispers of change mingled with rumors of secrets too deep to remain hidden. It was a moment when the veneer of the Academy's prestige threatened to shatter, and every conversation hinted at larger forces at play. In the aftermath of the event, Bayside's corridors were charged with a new kind of energy. Teachers and parents huddled in hushed groups, exchanging stunned glances and tentative words. Ms. Collins, once the epitome of flawless superiority, stood apart in a quiet corner of the library. Her hands trembled slightly as she reread the transcript of Xavier's presentation on her tablet. The remorse in her eyes was matched by a determination to make amends, a silent promise that she, too, would challenge the biases she had once perpetuated. Determined to set things right, she arranged impromptu meetings with faculty and administration, aware that the status quo had been irreparably altered. Meanwhile, Nathaniel Pierce, still clad in the reserved attire that marked his dual life, exited the auditorium with Xavier by his side. Though the outside world now saw him as a symbol of integrity and valor, an emblem of a father whose truth had finally emerged, the undercurrent of tension in his mind would not subside easily. As he drove home through the winding roads of Seabrook, his thoughts raced. Every minute, his secure phone buzzed with inquiries, polite yet probing questions from parents curious about the shadowy realm he inhabited, from colleagues in the national security community eager to glean insights from his unintentional public revelation. At home, the Pierce residence was already in a state of quiet activity. Nathaniel's wife, Gabriella, had returned from her business trip with a tired but determined look, her eyes reflecting both relief and concern. The family's modest dining room was abuzz with a subdued conversation, an exchange of thoughts about the day's events, the heavy implications of prejudice confronted, and the uncertain road ahead. Yet, beneath it all, the sense of vulnerability was palpable. Gabriella gently stroked Xavier's hair as he sat at the kitchen table, still reeling from the intensity of his experience. "You were so brave today," she whispered, and Xavier, with an earnest nod, managed a small, hopeful smile. But even as the Pierce family sought solace in their newfound unity, a distant and more insidious drama was unfolding. Word had begun to circulate that there were those within the Academy's inner circle who had not approved of Xavier's candidness. Behind polished smiles and empty nods of approval, a secret faction was quietly mobilizing. Rumors whispered of covert surveillance on school grounds and hidden agendas among certain influential parents. In hushed tones, they debated the potential fallout, the possibility that the disruption could bring unwanted scrutiny to their carefully maintained world of privilege and power. The next day at Bayside, a palpable shift stirred through the classrooms. The usual chirp of idle gossip was overlaid with urgent discussions about security, trust, and the fragility of reputation. Principal Hamilton, a man known for his unyielding dedication to tradition, appeared more troubled than ever. In his office adorned with stern portraits of past leaders, he pored over meeting notes and security reports. He knew that the fallout from Xavier's presentation went beyond individual pride, it threatened to expose vulnerabilities in the Academy's sanctified image. Reports had trickled in about an inexplicable breach in the school's data network, which some whispered might be related to the day's events. Though officials maintained a facade of routine explanation, the undercurrent suggested a deliberate probe into the Academy's security protocols. During a brisk lunch break in the courtyard, Xavier and his friend Leo Bennett sat together on a stone bench, the autumn breeze swirling around them. Leo, always upbeat, tried to lighten the mood. "Xavier, you really shook things up today. It's like you broke a spell." Xavier, his gaze distant, replied, "I only spoke the truth. But now I wonder if there's more than I knew, if all this isn't just about what people think of my dad, it's like someone wanted to use that truth to hide something else." Leo frowned thoughtfully, his eyes reflecting genuine concern for his friend's inner turmoil. Not far from the bench, a secluded group of parents gathered under an ancient oak. Their whispered exchanges hinted at discreet phone calls and furtive glances, conversations that spoke of clandestine meetings and unspoken alliances. One voice in the group, smooth yet edged with resolve, declared that the revelations of the past day could not be allowed to undermine the Academy's reputation. Our children must be protected, the speaker argued. We cannot let one boy's truth expose all that we have built. The sentiment was met with murmurs of assent from some, but a noticeable disquiet from others who had, for the first time, begun to question the validity of long-held prejudices. As the day wore on, in the quiet back corridors of the school's administration block, a discreet email was sent from an anonymous account. The message, terse and unembellished, outlined details of unusual activity on the school's network, a series of unauthorized logins, suspicious file transfers, and the erasure of security logs. It was a digital SOS. Unbeknownst to the majority of the Academy's citizens, a shadowy figure had breached the digital defenses, targeting the very information that reinforced the institution's legacy of exclusivity and protection. For Nathaniel, the possibility of a deliberate cyber intrusion meant that his private world of classified work and duty was colliding with the everyday lives of those around him. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to lower its golden gaze over Seabrook, Principal Hamilton summoned an emergency meeting with senior faculty and security personnel. In the austere confines of the principal's office, voices were hushed but urgent. The discussion veered from the ramifications of Xavier's presentation to the unsettling breach that now threatened to erode the institution's credibility. This isn't merely an issue of perception, Principal Hamilton intoned, his voice low and grave. We are potentially under attack, a coordinated effort to destabilize the Academy's secure environment. And if this is connected to the uproar yesterday, then someone is exploiting our vulnerabilities at a moment when emotions are running high. Among those in the meeting sat Ms. Collins, whose demeanor bore the marks of a woman striving to atone for her past misjudgments. She proposed initiating a full security audit of the school's data systems, and even suggested that the administration reach out to external experts who specialized in counterintelligence for educational institutions. We need to reclaim control of our narrative, she said softly, almost to herself, as if seeking forgiveness for her part in the turmoil. Her measured tone resonated with an undercurrent of determination, a promise to ensure that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, would prevail. Meanwhile, in the quiet corners of Seabrook, the reverberations of these events began to disrupt the carefully ordered lives of even those far removed from the Academy's immediate influence. Local news channels, ever eager for a story that merged youth, courage, and hidden high-stakes intrigue, started to report on the mysterious security glitch at Bayside Preparatory Academy. While the reports were vague, balanced between professional caution and sensationalism, the public's curiosity was undeniably piqued. Social media buzzed with speculation, some wondered if the breach was an isolated technological glitch, while others suspected that it was part of a broader, more deliberate scheme to undermine institutions of power. For Nathaniel Pierce, the digital attack on the Academy stirred a storm of disquiet. In a secure room within his home, a space designed for the most confidential of his operations, he reviewed the preliminary forensic reports provided by the school's IT team. The data painted a troubling picture, a sequence of anomalous network activity that coincided suspiciously with the increased media attention following Xavier's brave disclosure. Every log entry and encrypted snippet raised questions. Who was behind this attack? Why target Bayside now, when vulnerabilities in academic security were rarely in the spotlight? Nathaniel's mind churned with possibilities. Could it be that the same forces that had long worked to maintain the status quo in the privileged corridors of Bayside were now trying to leverage fear and chaos to cover up deeper secrets? Or was it an entirely external threat, a cyber-terrorist group exploiting the school's moment of vulnerability for their own obscure purposes? Each hypothesis was weighted with high stakes. Answering these questions was no longer merely a matter of reputation, but of safety for the students, faculty, and even the families connected to the Academy. As twilight descended, casting long shadows over Seabrook's quiet streets, the tension at Bayside only deepened. The emergency meeting ended with a resolute consensus. Immediate and decisive measures had to be taken to secure the school's network and to regain the trust of its community. While the technical experts scrambled to trace the digital footprint of the breach, the human element of the situation, the raw emotions stirred by yesterday's revelations, remained the most challenging obstacle to overcome. Back in his study that evening, Nathaniel sat quietly as Gabriella prepared tea. The silence between them was filled with unspoken worries and the heavy responsibility of navigating a terrain riddled with both external threats and internal fractures of trust. "We must be cautious," he finally said, more to himself than to anyone in particular. "For every truth we reveal, there could be someone waiting in the shadows to exploit it." Gabriella reached out, taking his hand in a gesture that conveyed solidarity and hope. For Xavier, the day's events left him with a profound awareness of the world's complexities. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he replayed the day's highs and lows, the empowering echo of his own voice, the fleeting moments of camaraderie from friends like Leo, and the stark realization that even an act of truth could ripple into unforeseen consequences. His thoughts were interrupted only by the gentle hum of distant activity, a reminder that the struggle for justice and understanding was far from over. As the academy's lights dimmed and the world outside settled into nighttime quiet, the cracks in its revered foundation had been exposed. In the lonely hush of the administrative offices, shadows whispered secrets of a conspiracy that might extend beyond Bayside's walls, linking to powerful interests in both the public and private sectors. Those who had once taken pride in maintaining the Academy's image were now forced to reckon with the possibility that long-held alliances and hidden agendas were colliding with a reality too bold to ignore. And so, as night deepened over Seabrook, the stage was set for the next chapter in this unfolding drama. The weight of deception and prejudice, combined with the raw courage of a young boy's truth, had drawn lines between those who would safeguard progress and those who clung stubbornly to outdated beliefs. In the midst of it all, the Pierce family, and indeed the entire Bayside community, were left to wonder, in the face of emerging threats and secrets unraveled, could unity and sincere introspection pave the way to a safer, more just future? What do you believe is the most important step to overcome hidden deceptions in our communities? Share your thoughts below. In the days following the tumultuous Parents' Day at Bayside Preparatory Academy, an undercurrent of paranoia and anxiety surged through every corridor of the school and every room of the Pierce household. It wasn't long before hidden forces, both digital and human, began their covert maneuvers, igniting a war that few outside the inner circle could ever fathom. Nathaniel Pierce spent long hours in his secure home study, meticulously poring over technical reports received from the Academy's IT team. The logs painted a chilling picture. On several occasions, fleeting digital footprints revealed attempts to breach the network, the same system that had safeguarded Bayside's confidential records and sensitive communications. Each anomaly was a silent reminder that someone, or something, was trying to penetrate the walls that many had taken for granted. As he analyzed the data, Nathaniel's mind raced, testing every hypothesis. Was this a random assault by cyber miscreants, or a calculated strike by an adversary determined to expose vulnerabilities and create chaos? While he wrestled with these pressing questions, Gabriella Pierce quietly managed the household, her calm exterior belying her inner turmoil. She had seen the toll the recent events had taken on her husband and son alike, a quiet desperation hidden behind routine smiles and reassuring gestures. In hushed conversations over late evening tea, Gabriella would ask, "Do you think they know who we really are?" And Nathaniel would reply in a measured tone, "They might, and that is why we must remain ever vigilant." Their words, though soft, carried the weight of a family caught in the crossfire of a greater scheme. At Bayside, the atmosphere was no less charged. Principal Hamilton, once a pillar of staunch tradition and order, had become uncharacteristically restless. The emergency meeting with faculty and security had set off a series of discreet but frantic actions, increased surveillance, covert audits of staff access logs, and an immediate freeze on the Academy's sensitive data systems. Ms. Collins, whose earlier apology had barely scratched the surface of the deep-seated prejudices within the institution, now found herself at the heart of reform discussions. But as she worked with the administration to institute sweeping changes in both security and policy, she couldn't shake the feeling that the breach was only the tip of a far more dangerous iceberg. Within the hallowed halls of Bayside, rumors about the cyber intrusion grew. Some whispered that the attack was orchestrated by a long-standing cabal of elites who had an interest in preserving the Academy's pristine reputation at any cost. Others speculated that it was a diversion, an act designed to distract from even more sinister schemes lurking behind closed doors. The prevailing uncertainty cast a pall over the school's daily rhythms. Students, once absorbed in their academic pursuits, began speaking in cautious tones about mysterious emails, missing files, and locked doors that now seemed less like safeguards and more like barriers concealing dark secrets. Xavier, who had become a reluctant symbol of change after his bold presentation, now felt the brunt of this shifting landscape. Initially buoyed by the admiration he'd received from his peers, he now experienced nights of restless sleep and days shadowed by fear. Every whisper in the hallway seemed to carry the undertone of conspiracy, and every glance from an adult appeared to bristle with hidden disapproval or concern. Even his close friend Leo, whose usually carefree nature had been a comfort, spoke less freely about future dreams and more often about making sure that nothing, no one, could catch them off guard. One crisp morning, as fog still clung to the edges of Seabrook, Nathaniel received an urgent encrypted message on his secure phone. The message was brief, its tone both commanding and chilling: "Your presence is required at the headquarters. The breach is escalating." Although Nathaniel had long prepared himself for the possibility that his covert work might one day intrude upon his personal life, this message felt more immediate, almost as if fate had chosen this moment to force him back into that perilous world. Reluctantly, he arranged to meet with high-ranking security officials at a remote government facility hidden beneath the city's industrial district. There, in a windowless, heavily guarded conference room, he was briefed on unsettling developments. The cyberattacks, it turned out, were not isolated incidents but part of a coordinated campaign by a sophisticated group operating under the codename Umbra. Their motives were shrouded in mystery, but early indicators suggested that they were targeting institutions tied to national security, including those whose fates were intertwined with the families of key operatives. The information left Nathaniel with a bitter aftertaste. Not only had his personal secret been thrust into the spotlight, but it now appeared that his family was inadvertently caught in a vast, unseen war, a war fought in the digital shadows and on the delicate boundary between public duty and private life. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him. As he left the facility and returned home in the dark of dusk, he found himself rehearsing possible scenarios. What if they escalated further? What if the attackers managed to breach more than just digital defenses? At home, as twilight merged into the inky calm of night, Nathaniel and Gabriella sat with Xavier at the dinner table, their faces carved with worry. They spoke quietly of the need to be cautious, to keep a low profile, and above all, to trust nothing without verification. "We're safe for now," Nathaniel assured Xavier, though his tone was too measured to dispel the fear gnawing at his heart. Xavier nodded, his expression unusually mature for his age, an unspoken acknowledgement that in a world where truth could be twisted and secrets exploited, innocence was a fragile luxury. In the days that followed, subtle changes began to manifest at Bayside. The Academy's administration introduced new protocols, mandatory updates to software systems, periodic security drills, and a dramatic tightening of access to administrative records. Teachers held extra sessions with students, not only about academic subjects but also about the responsibilities of digital citizenship and the importance of cybersecurity. These discussions, though couched in educational language, carried an urgent note: caution in the face of an unpredictable external threat. But the reforms also triggered backlash from certain quarters. A faction of influential parents, clinging desperately to the old ways of quiet superiority, met behind closed doors to strategize. Their whispered objections revolved around what they saw as an unwarranted invasion of privacy and the potential damage to the Academy's long-held traditions. "This is not about safety," one agitated voice argued during a secret meeting, "it is an assault on the fabric of our identity. They are using fear as an excuse to impose changes that disrupt the order we have always known." The dissent, though not widespread, hinted at a deeper struggle, a battle for the soul of Bayside itself. One afternoon, as the autumn rain began to fall in a silvery sheet over Seabrook, Xavier found solace in the school's art studio. Amid canvases and scattered brushes, he lost himself in painting, a vibrant splash of color, a defiant outburst against the gray limits imposed by fear. His brushstrokes were erratic and wild at first, but gradually they took shape into a striking portrait of resilience, a figure rising defiantly against a backdrop of technological codes and shattered assumptions. In that artistic sanctuary, Xavier transformed his inner turmoil into beauty, channeling the raw, unfiltered emotion that no amount of policy reform could ever suppress. Meanwhile, Nathaniel's nocturnal schedule became increasingly erratic. Late into the night, he would review intelligence reports while Gabriel's quiet whispers in the next room became his only anchor to the peaceful life that now seemed so distant. Every alert, every new entry in the cyber logs raised more questions than answers. The specter of Umbra was no longer an abstract threat, it was now deeply personal. Every time his secure phone vibrated, a chill ran down his spine, forcing him to wonder if the next message would demand an even higher price from his family. One humid evening, as a storm raged over Seabrook, Nathaniel sat staring at the cascade of data blinking on his monitor. A pattern was emerging, an intricate web of activity that pointed to an inside job. The breach wasn't entirely external, it had seated itself within the Academy's own network, suggesting the complicity of someone on the inside. This realization sent shockwaves through his guarded composure. If a trusted individual was the weak link, then all the measures taken might prove futile. The thought that someone familiar could be orchestrating this chaos was a bitter pill to swallow, and it spawned a spiral of suspicion that threatened to unravel the delicate fabric of trust that bound the school's community. By this time, whispers of the breach had reached the media. Overnight, the story exploded across local news channels, a tale of cyber espionage at one of the nation's most revered schools. The narrative was spun in various ways. Some outlets depicted it as a tragic failure of security, while others hinted at a shadow war playing out behind the curtains of privilege. For the public, the story was thrilling; for those intimately involved, it was a daily reminder of the harsh realities that lurked beneath the surface of seemingly perfect institutions. In a quiet, tense moment in the Pierce household, Nathaniel gathered his family in the living room. He looked into Xavier's eyes that held a blend of courage and worry, and spoke with a gravity that belied his role as a father. "We are in the midst of a conflict that goes far beyond what you see at school," he explained softly. "This isn't about just protecting an institution, it's about defending every truth we hold dear. We must learn to navigate a world where not everything is as it appears." His words, laden with wisdom and sorrow, resonated deeply with Xavier, who now understood that his personal battles were intertwined with far larger forces. As the storm outside intensified, so too did the internal strife at Bayside. An impromptu assembly was called for all students and staff, a rare public display intended to reassure the community. In the echoing auditorium, with rain drumming on the high windows, Principal Hamilton addressed the gathered crowd. His voice was steady yet thick with emotion. "Today, we face not only a breach of our systems, but a breach of the trust that binds us together," he declared. "Let this be a call to unity. We must confront our vulnerabilities honestly and work together to rebuild the security that has been compromised." His words, though intended to calm, set off a ripple of mixed responses. Some clung to hope, others stared blankly, their faith shaken. As twilight crept over the campus, a clandestine meeting took place in one of Bayside's unused wings. A small group of teachers and a few influential parents gathered discreetly. Their conversations, filled with hushed tones and furtive glances, revolved around fear, legacy, and survival. They debated heatedly whether to share more information about the breach with the public or to keep it hidden to preserve the Academy's image. The risk of transparency, they argued, might lead to further turmoil and expose more secrets than they were willing to risk. The meeting ended with no clear resolution, only a lingering sense of impending crisis and a recognition that they were all, whether knowingly or not, pawns in a larger game whose rules were being rewritten before their eyes. Outside, the incessant rainfall blurred the neon reflections of a city that now seemed both protective and hostile. In his sanctuary of isolation, Nathaniel weighed the escalating data and the emotional toll of this unseen war. Every byte of leaked information, every anonymous warning, and every intercepted communication was a piece of a deadly puzzle that he desperately needed to complete. The stakes were nothing less than the safety of his loved ones and the integrity of institutions that, in the eyes of the public, represented security and trust. The emerging evidence of an inside job only deepened the mystery, and the danger. As night settled in, Nathaniel's secure lines continued to buzz with cryptic messages. One such message, encrypted and terse, warned, "Trust no one. The enemy hides behind familiar faces." The word seared into his mind, a haunting echo that made him glower at the faces he had long considered allies. In that charged moment, he resolved to launch a discreet investigation of his own, one that would pierce the veil of loyalty and deception. He understood that the path ahead would be treacherous and fraught with sacrifices, yet the price of inaction was unthinkable. In this maelstrom of digital subterfuge and personal betrayal, Xavier's brave presentation had unwittingly become a catalyst for a far larger revelation. His simple act of truth had cracked open a fortress built on centuries of unquestioned assumption. Now, as the Academy and the Pierce family braced themselves for the next phase of this conflict, every heartbeat, every whispered secret, and every silent glance hinted at the reality that nothing would ever be the same again. How do you think trust can be rebuilt after secrets and breaches shake the foundation of our communities? Share your thoughts below. As the days turned into a relentless barrage of investigations and sleepless nights, the tension enveloping Bayside Preparatory Academy and the Pierce household reached a breaking point. With the evidence of a coordinated digital assault and an insidious inside job mounting, every member of the community, parents, teachers, and students alike, felt the weight of a betrayal that ran deep. It was as if the foundation of their cherished institution and the sanctity of their personal lives were being relentlessly chipped away by invisible forces determined to exploit every vulnerability. Nathaniel Pierce, now more a soldier of unseen wars than merely a concerned father, had resolved that the time had come to expose and confront the treachery at Bayside. His secure home had transformed into a command center, multiple screens displaying streams of raw data, encrypted messages flashing warnings, and shadowy profiles of those suspected to be involved. Each encrypted alert brought with it a chill of foreboding, as Nathaniel meticulously cross-checked every anomaly with the institution's security logs. He had learned that even the most trusted allies could hide treacherous intentions. His determination was fueled not only by the imperatives of his duty at the National Strategic Security Center but also by his fierce paternal instinct, a need to protect his family and reclaim the truth Xavier had so courageously revealed. Across town, the repercussions at Bayside began to reshape both policy and perspective. Principal Hamilton, bearing the heavy mantle of responsibility, convened a series of urgent assemblies. He declared that the Academy would undergo a complete restructuring of its security systems and a comprehensive audit of its internal processes. He also introduced an initiative aimed at fostering transparency and inclusivity, a move that, while intended to restore trust, was met with a mixture of hopeful support and guarded skepticism by a community already shaken to its core. Ms. Collins, too, found herself at the epicenter of transformation. Once notorious for her aloofness and preferential treatment, she now emerged as a reluctant champion for change. Determined to restore her credibility, she initiated collaboration with external experts in cybersecurity and educational administration. In heartfelt meetings with affected parents and students, she offered sincere apologies for her part in perpetuating harmful assumptions. Slowly, her efforts created a ripple effect that challenged the long-entrenched biases at Bayside. The Academy's culture, once defined by rigid social hierarchies and unyielding traditions, started to evolve into one where empathy, dialogue, and genuine understanding took root. Meanwhile, the investigation into the breach deepened. Nathaniel's covert inquiry uncovered troubling details. Evidence suggested that the perpetrators, under the codename Umbra, had exploited not only the Academy's digital infrastructure but had also gained access to sensitive information through the assistance of an insider. The realization struck him hard. Someone within Bayside's trusted circle was complicit in the deception. Over days, he worked side by side with federal agents and cyberforensics teams, piecing together a tangled web of encrypted communications, suspicious financial transactions, and off-hours logins. Each fragment of data pointed toward a network of individuals whose loyalty was bought by the lure of power and the desire to protect their own interests at the expense of truth. Amid the unfolding chaos, Xavier Pierce found himself grappling with a mix of empowerment and vulnerability. His courageous presentation had sparked a movement that reverberated far beyond his personal ordeal. Yet, in the aftermath of public scrutiny and harrowing revelations of deception, the boy's spirit was wearied by the sheer magnitude of forces arrayed against him. At school, he became a symbol, a beacon of honesty amid an environment long corrupted by prejudice. Fellow students, once indifferent or scornful, now approached him with cautious reverence and a desire to understand the deeper story behind his words. One chilly afternoon, as rain pattered softly against the academy's stained-glass windows during a memorial assembly, Xavier took his place in a small, dimly lit classroom. With trembling hands, he led a discussion on the corrosive effects of assumptions and the importance of embracing differences. His voice, though soft, carried an unmistakable strength and vulnerability, a plea for empathy in a world so often marred by superficial judgments. For many, that classroom session was transformative, a moment when the seeds of social change began to sprout in thoughtful, conscientious minds. Back at home, Nathaniel and Gabriella Pierce navigated their own emotional battlefields. Late into the night, after reviewing the latest cyber forensics reports and encrypted warnings, Nathaniel would pause to gaze at an old family photograph, a snapshot of Xavier as a toddler, his eyes bright with untarnished hope. Those memories served as a reminder of why he fought so relentlessly. It was not just national security at stake, but the future of his family, and by extension, the integrity of the community to which they belonged. Gabriella, ever the quiet pillar of strength, organized small neighborhood gatherings where families could share their experiences, vent their fears, and collectively demand accountability and transparency from the Academy's leadership. As spring blossomed, the external pressure on Bayside reached its climax. The federal investigation into Umbra's activities expanded to include several high-ranking officials suspected of collusion. News reports, though carefully worded due to ongoing security concerns, painted a picture of betrayal and hidden agendas that shook the very pillars of power. Public opinion swayed as parents questioned not only the Academy's administrative decisions but also the broader implications of a system that seemed to protect privilege at any cost. Social media became a battleground where the narrative was contested fiercely. Voices of those demanding justice rose against those who clung to the old guard of elite favoritism. In a dramatic twist that encapsulated the collision of personal valor and institutional corruption, an unexpected whistleblower emerged. A former member of the Academy's IT department, embittered by years of witnessing systemic cover-ups, released a trove of internal communications. These documents revealed a deliberate downplaying of security lapses and an attempt to mask the insider involvement in the breach. The exposé sent shockwaves through the community. Principal Hamilton was forced to step down temporarily while an independent review was launched. Meetings were held that bled into the night, and the Academy's board was compelled to reconsider its long-held alliances and policies. Amid this maelstrom, Nathaniel continued to lead from behind the scenes, orchestrating meetings with federal agents and local law enforcement to ensure that every layer of corruption was peeled back. His professional acumen, honed by years in the covert world of national security, now merged with a personal crusade against injustice. In secret sessions with other affected families, he shared his vision of a new paradigm, a framework where transparency, fairness, and robust security were not mutually exclusive but mutually reinforcing. These gatherings, though held under the cloak of privacy, blossomed into a grassroots movement advocating for tighter safeguards in all institutions entrusted with public welfare. One pivotal evening, as the sun dipped below Seabrook's horizon and painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, the Pierce family, joined by several community leaders, attended a town hall meeting held at a modest community center. Under the soft glow of fluorescent lights and amidst the hum of earnest voices, the assembled crowd demanded answers. They questioned the remnants of an elitist system that had allowed deception to flourish. Through impassioned speeches and tearful testimonies, the residents made it clear that the sacrifices of a brave few, like Xavier, Nathaniel, and those who had come forward as whistleblowers, were not in vain. They called for systemic reforms that would ensure that privilege no longer shielded individuals from accountability and that transparency would reign over secrecy. Xavier listened intently from beside his parents, absorbing the collective resolve and the promises of a reformed future. Though still a child, the weight of the moment was not lost on him. His eyes, still bearing traces of earlier sorrow, now shone with the fierce determination of someone who had witnessed firsthand how truth could ignite change. He began to envision a future where his voice, and the voices of countless others, would contribute to a society built on trust rather than assumption. As the investigation into Umbra's network gained traction, and key conspirators began to be apprehended, a slow yet palpable transformation overtook Bayside Preparatory Academy. New protocols were implemented with transparency at their core, regular independent audits, open forums between faculty and parents, and a renewed commitment to diversity and inclusion. The Academy's hallowed halls, once echoing with the clamor of unchallenged arrogance, now resonated with dialogues about fairness, security, and the moral imperative of protecting every individual's truth. In the final days of this arduous chapter, as the federal investigations wound down and legal proceedings promised to hold the guilty accountable, Nathaniel found a moment of solace. One quiet morning, as he watched the sunrise from the window of his study, a single ray of light piercing through the darkness, he reflected on the turbulent journey. The ordeal had cost him dearly in terms of lost sleep, strained relationships, and the ever-present specter of danger. But it had also ignited a change that could not be undone, a reawakening of a community's conscience and a reassertion of values that prioritize truth over prejudice, security over secrecy, and unity over division. At Bayside, a memorial mural was unveiled, dedicated to those who had fought for justice, transparency, and change. Xavier's portrait, rendered with striking honesty, a reminder of a boy who dared to challenge the status quo, was immortalized alongside symbols representing resilience and hope. Principal Hamilton's temporary departure and subsequent replacement by a more progressive leader signaled the dawn of a new era for the Academy. And in quiet conversations over tea in the Pierce living room, Nathaniel and Gabriella acknowledged that while the scars of this conflict might never fully fade, they would serve as constant reminders of the price of ignorance and the value of truth. In that reflective moment, surrounded by the artifacts of both pain and progress, a stack of investigative reports, the signed petitions from concerned parents, and Xavier's painting from the art studio, Nathaniel's resolve crystallized into a solemn vow, to remain ever vigilant, to continue the fight against deception in all its forms, and to ensure that the lessons of this dark chapter would pave the way for a brighter, more honest future. What do you believe will be the lasting impact of exposing hidden deceptions on our communities? Share your thoughts below. In the final moments of our journey through the trials at Bayside Preparatory Academy and the Pierce family's courageous struggle, we arrive at a quiet, heartfelt conclusion, a moment of pause and reflection meant to resonate deep within every viewer's soul. Here, we leave you not only with the echoes of a battle fought in both digital shadows and tangible hearts but with a message that calls us all to look within and embrace a future built on truth, empathy, and unity. When we close this chapter, we see a world that has been forever altered by the bravery of a young boy who dared to speak his truth, by a father whose steely resolve and warm love reminded us that the battles we fight are not merely our own, they echo into our communities and our lives. Xavier Pierce, with his courageous voice and resilient spirit, transformed the very fabric of an elitist institution, revealing that truth, even when wrapped in vulnerability, has the power to heal, inspire, and uplift. His shining example beckons us to reject the confines of prejudice and to recognize that every individual carries a story worthy of respect and admiration. Nathaniel Pierce's silent vigil in the darkness, those tireless nights deciphering secrets and safeguarding not only his family but the integrity of a community, reminds us that leadership is not measured by accolades alone. It is defined by unwavering commitment, compassion under fire, and the willingness to lead by example, even when the cost is deeply personal. His journey, fraught with hardship and sacrifice, ultimately underscores a universal lesson: our shared humanity is our strongest shield against the forces of fear and division. At Bayside, a place once defined by stifling conformity and unchallenged assumptions, the winds of change have swept through its grand halls. The painful lessons learned have opened up space for critical conversations, about fairness, about digital security, and above all, about the power of empathy. The Academy now stands as a symbol of transformation, its new policies and inclusive practices a testament to the fact that even the most deeply entrenched systems can evolve when truth is allowed to flourish. The transformation witnessed at Bayside and within the Pierce family is not confined to the walls of a single institution, it is an invitation for us all. It calls on every one of us, no matter where we come from or what challenges we face, to confront our own biases. It reminds us that assumptions are merely shadows of ignorance, and that when we choose to illuminate them with the light of understanding, we create a space where trust, respect, and love can prevail. In these trying times, our story is a gentle reminder that change is possible when courage meets vulnerability. It is the reminder that while the journey to justice and truth may be fraught with pain and uncertainty, it is also filled with moments of quiet grace, moments where compassion triumphs over prejudice and where communities rally together to mend the broken and neglected. Every tear shed in the wake of humiliation, every furtive glance filled with suspicion, has given way to the nourishing hope of a kinder, more compassionate future. As you reflect on this story, allow your hearts to be stirred by the profound truth it carries. No one's truth should be hidden or diminished by the prejudices of others. Every voice matters, every experience is significant, and every step toward understanding is a victory against a tide of indifference. True strength is found not in silencing the vulnerable but in empowering them to speak up and shine through, transforming wounds into wisdom, and sorrow into an invitation for healing. This message of hope and unity is our collective inheritance, urging us to stand together, to challenge the status quo, and to create a world where every individual is seen, valued, and loved. Before we part, take a moment to reflect on what you can do in your own community. How can you help break the cycle of assumptions and build bridges of understanding? Whether it's by offering a listening ear, supporting someone in need, or simply sharing your own story, remember that each small act of kindness contributes to a larger tapestry of change, a change that starts with you and spreads like ripples in a vast, interconnected ocean of humanity. Our hearts are full of gratitude for you, our cherished audience, for being part of this journey with us. Your engagement is not just a click, it is a powerful affirmation that together, we can transform darkness into light, isolation into togetherness, and fear into hope. Let this story serve as a beacon for your own life, urging you to never underestimate the impact of honesty, empathy, and courage. Embrace your truth, cherish your loved ones, and always remember that you have the power to make a difference. If this story has moved you, sparked new thoughts, or even encouraged you to challenge your own assumptions, then please, join us on this continuing voyage toward a brighter, more inclusive future. Your support means the world to us, every like, every comment, and every share helps amplify a message that is more important now than ever. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring narratives that challenge the status quo, celebrate the triumph of the human spirit, and remind us all that in a world full of noise, your voice is precious and worth hearing. Thank you for being here, and remember, together, we build a better tomorrow.